The Black Swan murder trial of Ashley Benefield, it starts up this week, and there's a lot to go through, a lot that's going to be presented to a jury. We'll see exactly how they come out with their opinions. As you remember, there's been some judges that have used the terms "not one scintilla of truth" to your story, Ashley. We'll see if a jury feels the same way, as those are just pieces of this whole case. Joining me to discuss, Bob Motta, defense attorney, host of the podcast Defense Diaries. All right, big overview on this one. What's your feelings going into this case?
Well, the interesting thing about like Benefield in a lot of Florida cases is when you have these types of situations where somebody shoots another person, they have the stand your ground law there. So we always in these types of cases get the opportunity to kind of hear their entire story before trial,
Sure.
which when this circumstance they had filed their motion, basically saying to dismiss the charges because they couldn't bring it under, the standard ground law that, he came into her house, she felt threatened, and she was standing her ground. That was, of course, rejected by the courts, which goes back to some of the comments that you're talking about. So, I mean, in terms of being able to employ the defense, they can still make the arguments,
Hmm.
right? It's still going to be the same story, that they got into it. She felt like her life was in danger, and she ended up shooting him. Um, it's like you said, whether or not the jury is going to buy it is ultimately what it's gonna lean on. Um, and they'll try to get in as much background as they can about like him shooting into the ceiling and just the various things that went on. It was a very short courting period, dude. 13 days, man, and then they're getting hitched. She was significantly younger.
Yeah.
Her like his daughter, I think her name's Ava or Eva, was
Hmm.
not a fan, not a
Yeah.
fan of the marriage, not necessarily a fan of Benefield herself. So it's going to be an interesting trial. It really is. It
The fact
really
that
is.
Doug really doesn't have or didn't have much of a history of violence or anything of that nature. He has a daughter that loves him, adores him. Um, typically, I get, there's nothing typical about a murder, but I guess typically, if you're to say, somebody who has kind of a history like that, you don't genuinely have the adoring daughter that's there. You typically don't have a lot of friends who are right there, ready to say, this is no one that we would recognize the way he's being described. Now, what goes on behind closed doors, that's a whole other thing.
Right.
But impulsivity is a big part of this, judging by those 13 days, and trying to get some attention seems to be a bit of a history here with Ashley.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, there's a record in terms of court records. She had made allegations against him, which I don't think were proven. They
Hmm.
certainly weren't proven criminally with a beyond reasonable doubt standard that she had felt that he was trying to poison her. The one
Yeah.
thing that we know did happen is he did discharge his weapon into the ceiling, like when they were. So I mean, there's some stuff there. Um, it always becomes the thing, like, are you just using a couple of or like one isolated incident, where things got a little heated and, trying to parlay that into, backing up your story that,
Sure.
was coming in threatening her life. Cases like this are tough.
Yeah.
They just are because, I mean, the only people that were there are the only people that know what happened, for
Hmm.
sure, for sure. And obviously, Doug is not there to give his side of this thing.
Sure.
So, we're talking about, basically Ashley, and I think her mom at the house.
Her
Yeah.
mom was out at a park when the shooting took place. She took the daughter out, and then that's when this all took place.
See
Um,
that
mhm.
smells that right? That smells a little
It
bit.
smells a
That
little
sounds
bit. I think the digital footprint that we're going to see here, once we take a look at text messages between Ashley and mom, are going to be revealing. I mean, that I think they will be, at least. I hope if it's beyond just, hey, I'm taking her to the park. I'll be back in an hour. If there's more to it, if there's Ashley saying, why didn't you guys go to the park, or has anything beyond that, I think it's going to look a little suspicious.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, we know that the state has looked through. I mean, the state understands how tough these cases are,
Yeah.
and we've talked about it before. The state is not in the business of going in and getting their ass handed to them.
Hmm.
Typically, if they're going to charge a case, they're pretty confident that they can meet that burden.
Yeah.
So that being said, they clearly feel that they have enough evidence, because if it's just she said, and there's no one to rebut her, that's a very difficult case for the state to win, right?
Hmm.
So they have to have some other circumstantial evidence that they feel is powerful enough.
Yeah.
Say, all right, well, I know what she's saying to you in court, but this is what she was texting. This is what was going on. And circumstantially, just use your common sense. Clearly, this was a setup. It kind of smells like the whole Charles Vallow thing that happened with Lori Vallow and her brother Alex, except Alex was the one doing the dirty deeds.
Yeah.
It's kind of got that, taking the kids out to go, run errands, and all this takes place while she's gone, and then they go back to so I don't. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting trial. I'm actually like, I'm really interested to watch it.
It kind of shows a pattern of behavior, though, too. If we're to look at previous incidents where the judge says we do not believe there was actual abuse that took place here, or one scintilla of truth, which I love that line, because there'd been other times where she had made these claims, and they kept coming back, going, "Yeah, I don't. There's nothing here that proves this." Making an
Right.
incident out of something, so it does make me wonder a little bit, and this is in no way to deflect if there was some sort of abuse or dismissal of abuse, but people do make shit up, and I'm
Oh
wondering,
God, yeah,
I'm
dude.
wondering how often some of these claims in the past of abuse and such were Ashley pushing the envelope with him as much as she could to almost to get him to try and do something that then she could go, "Look, see what he did to me," but he never actually did it. And
Right.
and so those attempts never worked out. Going to court and the custody hearing, she didn't like that very much. They did. Here's what we're learning now, though, from at least allegations from his cousin, I believe, who spoke I believe, with Court TV the other day. They were talking about what was going on in those last moments. Doug, from what we understand, was actually under the impression that they were getting back together. Doug just didn't show up at the house. He was there helping her move things into this U-Haul under the impression that they were going to go to Massachusetts together to go live. And they were working in tandem. It wasn't, I'm helping her move her stuff out. On the same point, on that same day, she's talking to her attorney saying, no, I'm not, I don't want to do this. Let's get a plan for me to go to a hotel, and then I'll move my stuff Monday. Unbeknownst to Doug, likely until that very afternoon when all of this, I guess, went down, and mom's away at the park at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, look,
That's
we're
a
gonna we're
weird
gonna
setup.
see. Yeah, well, we're gonna see the other side of that
Yeah.
conversation. Whatever she was telling Doug leading into that evening.
And why would you yeah,
I mean,
why would you be saying these things and getting him to come there? This is what makes
right.
it all weird, is why is he there coming to help you do these things, and he's under the impression this is what you're going to be doing if you don't want him there and you don't trust him near you by all the allegations that you've made. So why is he there? He doesn't have to be there. He was respecting your distance. You brought him in under this pretense, and then saying that he attacked you. Again, there's not a lot of evidence to it, and it shows a pattern of these stories of these let's get together and almost setup type behavior over and over.
Right. Well, it sounds like a plot.
Yeah.
It's simple. Sounds like she was plotting it. And to go back to your earlier point, it's like I've handled many, many, many orders of protection, hearings, what they call plenary hearings, where, you know, the problem with that statute, especially, and every state has some version of it, and we needed it
Mhm.
because women were being abused
Sure.
without any remedy forever.
Mhm.
So, we obviously needed that statute in place to help protect women. With that, you're going to have people that use that statute as a sword
Mhm.
as opposed to a shield,
Yeah.
which is not what it's supposed to be used for. And to your point, where people use it to make up allegations, especially when it's relating to custody of children. That's in my experience where I would see the thing being used as as a sword as opposed to a shield to protect them, but instead to get one or the other out of the house in anticipation of divorce. So they then had control of the house and residential. They had the residential ownership of the house during the pendency of the divorce, and typically that meant that they had the kids. So it started getting abused, which is a shame because we need these statutes to help protect especially women
Sure.
from abusive relationships. But to think that they're not used like in an abusive fashion in order to try to set up a scenario to knock down the dominoes as you're heading into a what could be a very bitter divorce is just not realistic because it happens more frequently than you'd think. And it's always that thing that it creates when you run into one of them, like say as an attorney, where you're like, wow, yeah, like because like when you have a client come in and they're like, yeah, she's making all this shit up, you're always taking it with a grain of salt,
Hmm.
right? You're like, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to wait to see what the discovery is on this thing. I want to hear what evidence they have of the abuse that they're claiming took place, and then we'll kind of land from there because you'll get those stories from clients who are like, oh yeah, she's nuts. Like everything she's saying is a complete lie. I swear to God, but you have no way to know,
Sure.
even as an attorney, you can't know.
Hmm.
And then when things start to bear themselves out, and sometimes it takes years, years where you have a parent that's lost, visitation with their kid based strictly on allegations made by the other party with really nothing else to back it up.
Hmm.
And then you have these huge fights, and it's always such a shame. But the fact because it's not taking into consideration who matters most in that situation, which is the children.
Sure.
Oh, that's like the thing that people just lose sight of in these bitter divorces is the kids.
Hmm.
It's always the kids. Like always have that at the forefront of your mind, your children.
Hmm.
Just be cognizant. It's not about you. Be an adult.
Hmm.
If your relationship's falling apart, then fine. If you're in a position where you're trying to make sure that your spouse who is very well off financially dies so that you are now going to be set up very well financially after he's dead before the divorce takes place, well, then, I mean, that sure the hell looks like motive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So these are the things that she's going to have to be battling. And I fully anticipate that the state will be bringing in any type of protective order that she tried to go in and get, wherein they had a hearing, because that's all under oath, that's
Hmm.
all on record. They're going to bring it in and say, look, they heard the evidence and this is what the judge was saying then. We don't think anything has changed. So the jury's, I'm assuming, is going to get to hear all that.
Yeah.
you know as far as I'm concerned, they're prior bad acts, and it just kind of goes to show what she does. So it's going to be interesting, though. It always is, because you never know what a jury's going to do,
Well,
ever.
especially, yeah, something like this where it's a lot of, she said he can't say anymore, and there isn't a lot of evidence. And
Right.
how do you decipher this? How do you determine what's true? Because you certainly don't want to not believe a true victim, but like you said,
Right.
that some people will use that shield as a sword, and that has to be called out when it happens. And this
Right.
one looks like that could very well be the case, but that's why we got the trial. That's why we'll go through the evidence and see what it
That's it,
all
man.
shows.
Always got to wait to trial.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.